Or you don't.
We're live.
Good evening. But no, I'm sorry. Good morning, or whatever. Welcome to this fine hour of WordSesh. I'm your host, David Bisset. We are fortunate enough today to be joined by some great people. Let me introduce them to you. Actually, let me allow them to introduce themselves. Ryan, can you tell people a little bit about yourself?
We're live.
What's that? Are we live now? Good evening. But no, I'm sorry.
You left the video playing in the background.
Yeah, let me welcome to this fine hour of WordSesh. I'm hearing my own horrible voice.
I think I've been here before.
We are
Deja vu.
joined by some great. Let me introduce them to you. Actually, there.
You actually did rip a hole in the space-time continuum, like Brian warned us about. I will go ahead and introduce myself a little bit. I'm Ryan Sullivan. I got into WordPress a little while ago, 4 or 5 years ago. Come from a systems administrator background, total neckbeard back in the day, and that probably hasn't changed a whole lot. But I started WP SiteCare, just launched a new company, Flagship, and are working on our first WordPress conference specifically aimed at developers called LoopConf. It's going to come up in May 6th through 8th this coming year, loopconf.io.
Yes. Mr. Doran, you are next.
All right. My name's Kiko Doran. I run a small consulting company called In-Group Consulting. We do basic business problem solving, and we do that 100% of the time through WordPress. We build WordPress applications to solve business problems. And I organized the WordCamp in Minneapolis for 2013 and 2014. Been to probably 30 or 40 WordCamps over the years, and this year started a conference called Prestige Conference with my co-founder Josh Broughton.
Interesting. Jenny.
Hi everyone, my name's Jenny. I am a human-made employee based in the UK. My background is actually from a PHP community background. My first agency was a PHP house. I am an ex-PHP Northwest organizer, which is the second largest conference in the UK. I ran WordCamp Manchester last year, and I am keynoting at PHP UK this year. So that's in February, so if anyone's in the London area or wants to come over, they're more than welcome to. They've got some WordPress people there, so it should be cool.
Thank you. All right, now I'll introduce myself again. I'm David Bisset. I am a WordCamp Miami organizer for 5 years. One of the larger WordCamps. Last year we had 700-800 people. I'm also a WordCamp mentor, co-organizer, volunteer, father, husband, and occasional responsible citizen. I organize multiple meetups in South Florida as well. So I'd like to welcome everyone. Now that we've got the introductions out of the way, I just wanted to remind our listeners that we're going to be talking about conferences. We're going to be talking about primarily non-WordCamp conferences. So now that we have those introductions, I want to throw out a general question to anyone who wants to grab it first. In the conferences that you guys have mentioned, generally speaking, what were the challenges in organizing or running your events? And let me ask a first question too. How many here have actually been involved running WordCamps specifically? Anybody who has or has not?
I think we all have.
We all have, right? Great. I just wanted to make that clear because we've all done WordCamps, but are also involved in non-WordCamp events. So how is organizing or running a non-WordCamp conference different from doing a WordCamp conference? And Jenny, do you want to maybe take that one first, or?
Sure. So one of the biggest differences is that PHP Northwest has a speakers package which includes travel, accommodation. Actually, it doesn't include travel, but it does include accommodation. And then we also do what we call an airport run. So anyone who is flying into Manchester will get picked up from the airport, get taken directly to the venue, and they get taken care of all the way through. So that's really nice. So one of the things that I was organizing when I was as I was an organizer was the airport runs, which is a bit of a nightmare when you've got a bunch of people who some don't want to give you their flight numbers or will give you the time and date and not the flight number, and they don't realize that Manchester Airport has 3 terminals and I need to know which terminal to be at because they're quite far away. So there's lots of little logistic problems that you have to deal with. Luckily, we have an amazing organizing team and admin team who all work together, so that's what makes it easier. The other big difference is probably cost-wise for the UK. WordCamps are generally about the £20 mark, whereas PHP conferences are probably about the £100 mark. And if it's in London, like the PHP UK conference, I think it's near the £300-400 mark, just because of the cost and the size of things that it is. So there's a lot more cost involved, unfortunately. So yeah, that's probably the biggest thing. The other thing I would say is that there is no foundation and there's no support in terms of a WordCamp Central for the PHP community. So all your sponsorship and stuff like that is per conference. So you are competing with other conferences, but also you are competing just to get people's budget. So that's also a major thing. Whereas at least with WordCamps, you've got a small pot already that you can kind of lean back on if you need it.
Oh, it's kind of more like a Mad Max type of situation.
I wouldn't go that far, but it can feel a bit stressful at times.
That's what I'd say, that it's really as different as you want it to be, because when you're dealing with WordCamp, you do have some guidelines. They do give you a lot of flexibility to instill those rules, or guidelines, however you'd like, within the guidelines. But when you do things on your own, it's really, you could do it as much like that or as little like that as you possibly want. You really, sky's the limit.
So while we're on that subject with Prestige Conference, what would be the biggest challenge that you would think that you would encounter in a WordCamp because you've already done one Prestige Conference? So
yeah, we did one in October. I think the biggest difference and the biggest hurdle to overcome is the sponsorship dollars. Trying to I did WordCamps before we had all the foundation dollars and then after, and you could really run a WordCamp now without doing a lot of fundraising. So the fundraising is something that you really have to figure out. I would say that I probably underestimated that a little bit, and that would be, the biggest hurdle in starting something new is you have to have the money. Either you're going to get the money from sponsors or you're going to get the money from ticket costs. And the thing that people underestimate with a WordCamp is you pay $20 for the ticket, but each person that comes through the door costs about $80 to $100 to put on a WordCamp. So the rest of that money does come from sponsor dollars.
Is this enough?
I can't see, you're too small.
No, it's actual size. It's a 5.
Yeah, no, that would not be enough.
All right. Ryan, LoopComp hasn't happened yet, so obviously you have not encountered the, all of the pain. But what fork in your side which you think currently exists?
Yeah. So we haven't had all the pain just because our conference hasn't happened yet, like you mentioned, but we've encountered some maybe some of our biggest obstacles. I would say the 2 biggest things are, one, you don't have the foundation background, so you start out not having not only the funding behind it, but also a whole community support volunteer network, right? You have to, all the logistical things that you're usually able to reach out to a local community and handle, those responsibilities kind of all fall back on you and finding those resources on your own. So that's a little bit tricky. And then the other big thing that I know a lot of conferences have to do, especially for first-time events, and something we're trying to do a lot better, is education in general. Just telling people and getting the word out about what it is we're doing, why we're doing it. who the core audience is, figuring out who that really is, and then really doing a good job of more, for lack of a better word, selling yourself as a great event. Because until that first one happens, people are they're gonna kind of wait and see is kind of gonna be their approach a little bit. And once it does happen and it's awesome, then year two and so on ends up being a little bit easier, I think. But those are some of the initial challenges for a first-time event.
All right. And Jenny, how many people would you say help run and organize the PHP conference? Primarily, I know there's lots of volunteers, but what would you say would be the core team number?
So PHP Northwest, I would say the core team members are probably about 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. If I've not missed anyone out.
No, 6 is fine. And how big?
Yeah, I'd say about 6, probably 6 people. And actually, like about 3 of those people are like full on working on the conference, like literally are the brains of the conference. And like, if you wanted the Wikipedia for the conference, they are the people to go and ask because they know everything that's going on. If not, like I always go and ask them, like, what is it that you need? For the PHP UK, I know there's 2 of them, but I actually don't know if they've got a bigger team than that. I would assume they would, but generally, I know like PHP Benelux, I think is a team of 6 as well. So yeah, roughly about that number.
How big is the PHP conference in terms of attendance, ballpark figure?
So the PHP UK one, which is the biggest in the UK, is about 600-700 people. And then PHP Northwest is 420, and that's capped because of the venue, hence why I know the exact number.
So, Kiko, Prestige Conference, how many people is in your core team for how many attendees?
We have 6 people on our core team as well, and we limit our audience to, we try to cap it at around 150 for each conference.
So that is a significantly smaller, I mean, if that were a WordCamp, that would be like that would be a closet at WordCamp Miami, or that would be a, I mean.
We're also doing single track though, so it's a little bit different.
Oh, yes, absolutely. I'm sorry. I've got closets in my mind because I've currently locked my kids in one while this is going forward. So remind me around in about 30 minutes. Ryan, you took a different, you've taken a different route. I mean, there are people involved, but briefly just mention you actually hired an outside team to do much of your organizing. Can you tell us in a couple of sentences why you did that, and just basically why, and how that is going for you?
Yeah, so there are a couple of different reasons behind that. One, it helps to have a little bit of context, but essentially some good friends of mine ran a conference last year called NGConf, which is the biggest Angular conference in the world. It's super popular. This year they sold out in literally, under a minute type of thing for over 800 attendees. They came to me and had this idea to do something similar in the WordPress space, and they already had a system that worked, right? And so me, not being an expert event planner or whatever, thought it made a lot of sense to go with the format that worked for them as far as organization. And what they had done is they had hired a professional event planner who, they have all their own staff and whatnot. But even with all that, the number of hours that just our organizing team is 5, and even with a lot of the logistical things handled, we've been working a huge number of hours already, and kind of expect that to go up a lot more as we get closer and closer to the conference. So generally what the organizing team is handling is a lot of communication with things like getting bids from hotels, and all the logistics of the hotel itself, and conference space, and all these different things. That's kind of what their expertise is and what they're handling. And then we're doing a lot of talking to sponsors, getting the word out to attendees, education about what the conference really is, all those types of things. So even though we have kind of hired some of that help out, there's still a lot involved besides.
Just want to bring you guys up. Our first poll for the WordPress conference people. How many people are planning to attend WordPress conferences in 2015? This could be WordCamps or any others. So far, nobody has planned to go to no WordCamps, so or conferences. So, kudos to our community. Most of the people, 17 votes. The vast majority are planning to go to 2 to 5 conferences next year, and then it drops off after that, between 1 and then more conferences after that. So it could be going to somebody's conferences that you'll be also attending. Let me focus this next question on. Let's ask Kiko, because I think Ryan just talked about him hiring outside help for his event planners, and we know what event planners exist. Would you ever consider going that route in Prestige Conference, or if you want to dodge that question and think of the larger one, do you think there's a need for these event planners for WordCamp, let's see, we got to find a better word for this, WordPress conferences in general, obviously outside WordCamps?
I guess I technically have hired an event planner because I have an event planner on my staff that has organized like Heart Association events and big events, like bigger events than what we're organizing. So in a way, I do think that I've already done that. But the one thing that, like Ryan was talking about, like he still has to do things to work with the event planner. Doing a first-time event, like you have no idea what your budgets are. It really can be stressful. And the event planners come to you and say, yeah, great, we're going to have an after party. How much money? And it's really stressful. You have to figure all that stuff out. And the first time through, it really can be a bit of a nightmare. It's like we just want it to be great, but I don't know how much money yet because everything is in limbo at this point. So the event planner is great because once you give them kind of some direction, they can go and knock all those things out, and they don't have the emotional attachment to the stuff that's happening. They just go and take care of business. And so I think that would be really helpful for any staff to have an event planner. And when you're looking at WordCamps, you kind of get a lot of that through the foundation. You get a lot of that, support from people that have done this hundreds and hundreds of times. So I would say it's definitely a great idea to do that. Just make sure.
Okay, now you're perfect lead in, because now I want to start to get into the meat of things. We've talked about your conferences, we've talked about some challenges, but now I'm really interested in how these conferences impact two major areas. One would be the WordPress community, and one would be outside of the WordPress community. As a WordCamp organizer myself, I'm very conscious of trying to get other people involved, not just people within the WordPress community bubble, because we are, I don't want to speak for you guys. You guys will have a chance to speak in a second on this, but I don't like doing the same WordCamp event year after year after year. And that's me talking about Miami, which is fairly large. We have lots of things going on. It's very difficult for me personally to find, after 5 years, still keeping it fresh and interesting, not just to have another WordCamp because the calendar has moved up a number. So quality control for me is very important, and I'm starting to realize more and more now that involving people from outside the traditional bubble, or what people even call circuit speakers, maybe, although I kind of hate that term. I prefer the term more, experienced roadsters. Jenny, I know. Let's start with the outside community first,
Sure.
Or not that bad word. The community at large at first, and then we'll kind of get more specific toward the WordPress. I know that you have some opinions and feelings about making communities feel accessible to not only the WordPress community, but those outside the community, PHP and so forth. How do you feel that your conference and the conferences that are going on right now, like Prestige and the upcoming LoopConf and your conference, how do they impact or present an image to these outside people, or the community in general?
Yeah. So when I was organizing WordCamp Manchester, and when I go to lots of WordCamps, a lot of people say to me, "Oh, it's not not technical enough. It's not this. It's not that." And let's face it, the WordPress community as a whole has so many different types of people and different groups of people with different interests. It's really hard to create a WordCamp that satisfies everyone. And this is why external communities are, you know, like you say, the wider community is really important. When I go to user groups, I always emphasize the fact that people, if they want to learn PHP, should go to a PHP conference. That's where everyone's going to be talking PHP. And a lot of people that I meet will probably say, oh, no, I don't know enough about PHP, or I don't know if I will be able to, you know, understand everything that's going on. And I always say to those people, that's totally normal, and that's totally okay. I went to my first conference, PHP Northwest, when I was a student. I knew next to nothing. I'd done half a module on PHP, and by going to that conference, I learned so much more. And the most important thing I learned was who to ask for help. Like asking people for help, and asking people, can you explain this in a bit more detail? Can you just explain this in more layman terms for me, because I don't understand what's going on? And just asking those simple questions that people forget when they've been in the industry for a long time. So that is really why I think more people should go to these conferences. I'm talking to a lot of the PHP community and saying, hey, please will you make this more accessible for the WordPress community? And at the end of the day, most people would just say, hey, we would love more WordPress people to come along. We don't know why they're not turning up. And what I find is sometimes there are actually WordPress people there, but just don't admit it, which is absolutely fine. And sometimes it's just people's fear. So it's just removing that fear by having people that they are inspired by going to all these different events.
So, Ryan, what efforts are you making with LoopConf to go out to address general community? And this was an unrehearsed question, so I apologize.
No, I love curveballs. So.
Oh, this is a slow-moving kickball. I'm rolling it right at you. Go for it. Okay,
then I'm going to take a deep breath and respond. No, what we've done is we've tried to bring in. We have over 30 speakers coming to this event. We've tried to bring in a lot of people who are part of the more tight-knit WordPress community, but we've been trying to bring in a lot of people who may be familiar with WordPress or a core competency within WordPress, but maybe not WordPress specifically. For example, we have a number of PHP, pure PHP devs who are coming to speak at the conference. Talk about things like, unit testing and some of those concepts that I don't want to call them new to the WordPress community, but that are a big part of maybe the PHP community. And then also with JavaScript, we're bringing in people who are experts in Angular and Ember and these other JavaScript frameworks backbone that are actually part of WordPress, but may not be areas where WordPress developers are, super competent or really confident. So that's kind of how we've been trying to do it from a technology standpoint. But because we've been bringing in these speakers with competencies in these core technologies, it has helped us. It's bringing in new people, which is kind of the end goal of all of this. Create, bridging gaps and making sure that they're, people aren't afraid to come in, and that also people within our community aren't afraid to go out and look at other open source projects.
Great, that's fantastic. And because, like I said, WordCamps can do it, but they're to keep it, there's just hasn't been, there's obviously more freedom or more opportunities with non-WordCamps, at least in my opinion. But especially it comes down sometimes just plain budgets, and there are, and the freedom that comes with those. By the way, I'm getting just, oh yes, we have a new poll up right now on the WordSesh. What is the best thing about niche WordPress conferences? Please go there and vote now. And that poll is brought to you by WP Eagle? Birdie?
He's trolling the troll. Well done.
Some sort of bird. Anyway, back to our conversation. What I want, let's talk ticket prices. Since these are not WordCamps, we're obviously $30 or $40 tickets are not happening. And I wanted to, Jenny, what is the typical price for your event ticket, price-wise?
So
Maybe
in the
translate
UK,
to dollars.
I cannot translate it to dollars. Okay, so for example, PHP World I think was about $800.
Mm-hmm.
I know ZenCon, which is like the biggest PHP conference in the world, is like 1,000 plus. In terms of the UK market, if we're looking at PHP Northwest, it's £120, so probably about the $200 mark, if I've done my maths correctly, quickly. And then PHP UK, because it's based in London, and the north-south divide in terms of venue pricing is crazy. That's probably about the $500 mark. So yeah, that's probably where we are.
All right, and Kiko, how much? Real quick, how much was Prestige? Remind me.
The first Prestige conference was $99 for in-person tickets and $49 for live streaming tickets.
What made you come up with that price? Generally speaking, obviously you don't have to itemize everything, but why that price, not 3 times as much or half that much?
Well, I turned the lights off and I took a dart and I threw it at the dartboard, and that's what it hit. We really had nothing to base it on because we had no idea what we were going to get for sponsorship. We were shooting at a $200 ticket, and we had early bird pricing of $99, and we had a great outreach of sponsorship, and that really helped us to be able to. We just kept the prices at $99 for the whole event. This next event, we're still sticking with the $200 ticket price, and we're going to Las Vegas now for the next one, so the prices, everything is increased in cost quite a bit from Minneapolis in our first event, but it's kind of a work in progress, I would say. We definitely we spent, per person that came to the first conference, we spent almost $250 per person, so the $99 ticket price really didn't scratch the surface at what the expense was. And also, you deal with the fact that the later you sell these tickets, the more expensive it is to do all these things. So if you have people that are buying tickets 2 weeks out, you have to have T-shirts and all these things in sizes for those people. So the earlier you can sell the tickets, the better off you're going to be, because you can forecast your food and you can forecast your swag. You can forecast all these things way out in front. So the early bird pricing is something that really helps a lot. It saves your attendees money, but it also saves you a lot of headache to be able to know who's coming, what the dietary restrictions are, what size sweatshirts, T-shirts, whatever it is that you're providing to them. Get all that stuff locked up early.
Right. So Ryan, with LoopConf, there was actually some discussion when you did release the ticket prices within the WordPress community itself, and there was some discussion about that. I don't want to spend time rehashing that too much, because either people can familiarize themselves with that on a WP Tavern articles and all of that. But what was your initial reaction? What was your honest initial reaction to that? And how did you respond from there on out? Did you expect this at all? With a I'm sorry. Take it from there.
Yeah. So I talked to a number of people before we released any ticket pricing just to get feedback, and the feedback I got from most people, obviously, a lot of these are business decisions too, right? When we were looking at kind of what our costs were going to be and those types of things, that played a big factor. But I reached out to quite a few people before we released any pricing, and the general feedback was, maybe that's a little high, but it wasn't any kind of or on the higher end. But as we compared it, and we took that feedback, and of those people who said it was on the higher end, most of them said, but if you're going to get these speakers that you're talking about getting, I would still pay that. So then we compared it, across other industries and other conferences like PHP conferences and that type of thing, and found out, we were getting pretty close to in line with what was more common in other industries. So did I anticipate? There was a pretty big backlash initially, and
yeah,
I can't say I anticipated that. but I thought there might be some level of pushback, right? But at the same time, I really, as far as how I responded to that, the only thing we could really do at that point was work to educate more and, really talk to people about what it is we're trying to accomplish. And we're still kind of getting the message out about that more and more every day, and reaching out privately to a whole bunch of different people to, to kind of make sure they know, what's going to be included for all these prices, and for this price, all of the stuff that we're going to be covering, all of our speakers are going to be taken care of, from travel from all corners of the globe. I mean, there's a huge amount of expense associated with those types of things, and so there's actually, when you look at the actual numbers, there's very little margin in our ticket prices.
Yeah, that's actually, not to interrupt you, Ryan, but that's actually surprising too, because I've heard people try to do the math, and they say, well, $800, and you're anticipating what, 500 or 600 people. I mean, if you can do multiplication, that's more than a few dollars.
Yeah.
But then again, like you said, there's a lot that is going into your expenses as well.
A lot, yeah.
Well, yeah, yeah. I mean, I've heard it, and I don't really have a horse in this particular race. I do WordCamps, right? So I have a specific personal question I'll be asking you guys in a minute. But I just do. While we're still on the subject of pricing, and this is open to all three of you, how do you know? Let's put aside for a second. You have expenses, but expenses on some levels can be controlled, just like they are at WordCamps. How do you know the right price point in terms of when you got the right ticket and you're not making it exclusive to the 1%, as it were, of those who are able to go? What's a good balance? Kiko, actually, let's start with you, because I actually personally found Pressnomics personally to have a good price point. And I know that the people who run Pressnomics have actually pointed this out as well, in terms of, they don't want to exclude too many people either, that they have the price point in their minds, at that right balancing level. So again, anyone who wants to jump in here, how do you know when you've got that sweet spot? I
mean, you have the sweet spot when you're selling all your tickets and the event goes off and you're actually making money for all the time you put in. But the thing I would say, like in Ryan's defense on the price, that price isn't unreasonable. And it's one thing to say, like, we expect to have 600 people or 700 people, but before you have 700 people, you have one ticket and two tickets. And that's the time when the acid reflux kicks in a little bit and you start to feel a little sick. Like, oh my God, we've sold 50 tickets. And the first ticket is when I started to feel sick, like, oh my God, we actually have to put this event on now, and now we need to sell the other tickets. And until you do that, like, you've gone out on the line and said, okay, I'm going to fly all these people in, we're going to pay for their hotel. There's a huge, like, initial expense with that, and you have to meet that expense first and foremost. You don't want to lose money doing these things, because you're really trying to give back to the community at large, and try to give it a different flavor than just a typical WordCamp flavor. And like, I saw there's a question asking, like, what's the benefit of flying solo versus using the foundation? And I think it's really critical to not have 5 people decide what our conference landscape is going to look like. And if we only rely on the foundation, we're really relying on a small group of people to decide everything, and the only way that we're ever going to have conferences. So I think the competition is really good for the ecosystem. There's a lot of different ways to skin the cat, and you can charge for streaming tickets, not charge for them. You can charge more money. You can get more sponsors. There's a lot of ways to do it, but in the end, it has to balance in the end.
So Jenny, first question to you, and then you other two gentlemen can chime in. I've heard the term conferences should raise their rates, especially if they are selling out. Do you agree with that, Jenny?
I think it depends on what your goal is. For example, if you are just there to break even, then unless the price of your expenses have gone up, I don't see the point of raising the rates. Both PHP Northwest and PHP UK are community-driven conferences, and that they're actually not for profit. There are other conferences which are actually profit-driven. They're actually businesses, and people are relying on their livelihoods to do these conferences. In that case, yes, if you're there as a business, and let's face it, as a business, you need to make money, then yeah, if you can charge more, then do. I mean, that's the whole point. And I also think that at the end of the day, the community gets every single person with money and with the ability to travel gets to choose where they go. So if you don't like the price of something, don't go to it. It's as simple as that. And people will vote with their wallet. I also think it's very important about the audience that you're targeting as well. For example, if you are targeting freelancers or people who are just starting out, they're going to have a different amount of money requirement to someone else. They'll have different financial situations. If you are targeting major corporations who quite often will put emphasis on the price of something because that's the old way of doing things and that's how they're used to things, and you're used to expensive things meaning quality. And although that's not true, as the WordPress community knows and as the open source community knows, that mindset to get your boss to even agree to pay a $20 ticket can actually be harder than getting them to pay a $400 ticket. So it's also about the kind of audience you're expecting and what you're driving towards.
Right. Go ahead. Somebody said something. Kiko, do you ever do you agree on raising rates?
I think that you have to find that happy medium. I don't know if it sells out. I mean, if you're running it as a business, then I don't see a problem with raising the rates. You have to find that happy number, though. You don't want to raise the rates to the point that you don't sell tickets. But if you make a bunch of money and you're in this for the long haul, you're going to use that money then for the next conference so that you don't have that that indigestion because you just agreed to fly 30 people into town from all corners of the globe. So it should get easier over time. You don't want to be stressed out like a startup mentality every single time you put on one of these conferences. That's not really, you'll die at a young age if you do that.
Well, good thing I'm not young.
Yeah, me too.
Brian, in the sense my final 2 cents on this is that I don't have a problem paying more for conference prices, especially if you look at a list of partners and these other conferences that exist outside the WordPress community. There are a lot more than even what LoopConf is charging. I have yet to go to a lot of these conferences, partly because of price, partly just because of my schedule. As a WordCamp organizer myself, I have a very deep concern about involving new people at conferences. So my opinion is there has to be a balance between making money and making sure expenses are covered, providing adequate money for things for attendees and speakers. But at the same time, I don't want to go to the same LoopConf or PrestigeConf year after year and have the same people basically there because they're the ones that can afford it. So that's why I think I enjoyed my first couple of conferences like Pressnomics and so forth, where you do have those people, you do see new faces and get to meet new people every year, especially if you don't see those at WordCamps, those particular people at WordCamps. So let's see, we did talk about speakers.
Can I just jump in? I also think something that we've not really mentioned is that we've talked about expenses and venue costs and even especially in the States where you have to fly everyone in, which is something that PHP Northwest doesn't do. We just outright say this is not a conference that actually pays for travel. We also look at you need to look at if a conference is paying for their speakers. I always think that if you are making profit, then the speakers should also get a share of that profit. But that's coming from someone who has never been in a situation where I've created a for-profit conference. So that, from my point of view, is an idealistic thing. I don't know if that's a reality, just because they have to make the time up to do that as well. So that might be actually a large point. Yeah.
I think the speakers get paid first, though. If we're paying for their travel and their expenses, they're actually the first ones to profit from it. In not necessarily profit, but not have any expense. Where as organizers starting a business, we're the ones guaranteeing all that money too. So I do think that everyone should get paid for your time, and I think that this this conference landscape is new, and if LoopConf goes off and people say, oh yeah, wow, they made $800 million, then I'm sure Ryan would next time pass that on to people. But the first time in, you just really don't know how it's going to go down, and you are guaranteeing at least that the speakers aren't going to have any expense to come to it. And I think that's one of the key differences between WordCamps and what people are terming niche conferences, I guess. But I think that the speakers, that was my first priority to change, was to pay for the speakers to come so that they didn't have expense. When you look at speaking at a WordCamp out of town, it's like a minimum $1,000 bill to be able to go and fly there, stay in a hotel, have your food and everything. It's a big expense. So I wanted to at least eliminate that for speakers first.
I have no idea how much Tom pays for my travel to San Fran, but I'm sure it was a hefty amount.
I bet yours is well over $1,000.
Yeah, well, I know the flight itself is about $1,000, so yeah.
So we have about 3 minutes left. Let's do some rapid-fire questions. Try to keep it under 30 seconds if we can. Ryan, rapid-fire question for you. How did you determine your diversity in your speaker lineup for the upcoming LoopConf?
That was one of our that was one of the things that was honestly most important to me. I wanted to make sure that we were getting representation from all sorts of people, from not even just different different groups, but also different skill sets and all these different types of things. So when we reached out to speakers initially, we were reaching out to individuals that we felt were going to bring the most to the audience. And I feel like we've done that really well as far as speaker diversity and getting experts from different fields and also from different ethnic groups and gender groups and what all these different things. I feel like that's one place where LoopConf has done really well.
We could talk a full hour on just diversity in speaker lineups alone. And God, I don't want to go down that rabbit hole right now. But yes, that is commendable and very true, Ryan.
No matter how hard you try, though, you'll push somebody out and somebody will be offended. It just seems that it's impossible to include everybody. And no matter, you think about gender, you think about race, you think about ethnicity type things, then it'll be that like everybody was short. It just seems like it's never ending. That it's hard to do when you only have 30 people. You can't represent absolutely everybody, and we try really hard, but it can be tough to do.
Oh, Jenny, I'm sorry. I have one more rapid-fire question. Jenny, see if you can boil this down 30 seconds or less. What's the number one thing that conference organizers, both at WordCamps and the ones that are running these other WordPress conferences, what can they do to better represent the WordPress community to those on the other side?
I think being open-hearted and opening the door and share the love. Really, I think both I know for a fact both the PHP community and the WordPress community are brilliant communities. Sometimes we have fights. That's absolutely okay. It's just about being respectful and being considerate. And I think being inclusive, just inviting everyone to the party, no matter who you are or what your background is or even what your skill set is. It doesn't matter. Everyone's welcome to the party. And if people can understand that and take that on board, then they'll realize that the world is their oyster.
So if I had to, if you guys could say one sentence about how, because you guys are running conferences that do not have the WordPress Foundation backing, what would be the number one thing that justifies to you the risk of not having this type of backing and going it on your own if you had to throw it in one sentence? Ryan?
Flexibility and freedom to do whatever you want to do.
Good, one sentence. That's very good. Kiko?
I'd say the same thing: flexibility in what you want to do, and flexibility for your ticket holders too, that they get to see a different type of conference and different flavor.
And Jenny?
I'm part of the PHP community, so we don't even have a central thing. So just being part of a different community is awesome.
I'm trying to do an animated GIF. All right. Well, our time is up. I would actually love to have a further discussion with you guys at some point in the future if they ever decide to give me another WordSesh job again. I want to thank our panelists today, Jenny, Kiko, and Ryan. You've been very well. Please, everyone, I encourage you to check them out on Twitter. Give us a chat, fill out the rest of the polls that are in WordSesh, and hopefully we will see you guys at your upcoming conferences. And my name is David Bisset, and I hope you have an enjoyable time and have a good rest of the day.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.